All right. So once again, you're all welcome to a deep dive session happening every weekend. And today we are pleased to have Ernest Akapko, who is also known as Pablo in the Web3 space, as our guest. You're welcome. And Likem is going to be the host for today's session. And right now, I will be leaving the floor for Likem to take over. All right, Likem, you're welcome. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Salvia. Really appreciate. All right, you're all welcome to this session where we'll be discussing the topic idea to reality, building winning Web3 hackathon project. I'm very delighted to host this one with Pablo. He'll be the one sharing all the insights. All right, Pablo, I'll just leave the floor for you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you're currently building, and we kick start from there.
Yeah, hello guys. GM. Hope I'm loud and clear. Check mic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. So as you said, I'm known as Pablo, but then my real name is Ernest Akapko, and so I am the founder of BB Club. It's a student-focused club. Also, I'm the contributor at Cello Africa Dio, which is focused on projects in Africa. And lastly, I love building, especially in hackathons. And then also a contributor at AOC. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks all for inviting me.
All right, that's so cool. I said today with as I said earlier, if you're in this meeting, then you should know that the topic for discussion today is from idea to reality, how to build winning hackathon or three hackathon projects. Okay, so Pablo, walk us through how did you get to start hacking? Like what was the thing that moved you that hey, let me join a hackathon? What was your first review experience like? Hackathon experience like?
Yeah, so my first experience was last year. Actually, I was a bit scared to hack because I felt like I was gonna not win the hackathon. And especially I didn't have a lot and a lot of ideas about building in hackathons, so I was really scared during that time. And my team, I was the only guy who knew more of Web3, so we were about five, and I was the only Web3 guy, so I was a bit scared. But then what kept me going was some of the reviews I saw from a lot of people hacking, and especially some projects that were brought out of hackathons, some big projects that are now like 1 billion worth uh, of company, such as Push Protocol, and then other companies that have passed through hackathons that have won. And so seeing those projects going out of hackathons, I felt energized to also try my best to try my luck to participate in that hackathon, and that was it.
Nice. Nice. So what was the first thing you built like product you built at the hackathon? Just curious.
Yeah, so our first earlier, I was participating in hackathons. That was a Web2 hackathon. So we created something called Therapeutic, which was focused on health. And one thing that you should know about hackathons are not only for the money, right? Hackathons are to elevate yourself in terms of experience, in terms of gaining, seeing how you can work with a team, seeing how you can collaborate with a team. Hackathon teaches you all that. So my first hackathon was a Web2 hackathon, which we built something called a health app that is focused on helping the youth to connect with doctors. You know, sometimes when you have sicknesses like HIV and other sicknesses, you don't like to have an interaction with other doctors, or when you're having issues with your mind, which literally you need to go for a therapy, but it's difficult for people to have that interaction. So we created something called therapeutic, which connects you directly to doctors that you don't know and have that interactions with them. And also we had this interface, front interface, which was Web2, and the back end was blockchain. So we store the data in blockchain, and then the front end was a Web2 app. Then from that Web2, I moved to Web3. That was my first, which was Easy Wally, which was connecting wallet addresses to numbers, right? So that was my first hackathon in Web3, which was Easy Wally.
All right. Were you able to complete it? Because a lot of beginners go to hackathons their first, and most of the experience you hear is I wasn't able to complete it, and sometimes they feel down that they were not able to submit or win a prize. What was your experience like on that?
Yes. So number one, hackathons are not supposed to be completed, right? Your basic functions need to work. So you don't need to compete in a hackathon for completing that particular project. If you do think of completing that particular project, then it's not a hackathon, right? Hackathons are for you to reach a level where you have the basic functions working. So let's say you have a hackathon that's probably it says that you're supposed to have um, maybe a button working, which when you enter that button, it takes your email, and you're thinking about just completing the product, right? And you've not even done the button to have that email. You've already lost in that particular hackathon. So on my first hackathon, it wasn't, we were thinking that was my first. So I thought we needed to finish that particular hackathon. But thank God we had mentors there. So they were like, we're not supposed to finish that particular project. We just need to make sure that the basic functions work. So for that particular Easy Wally, we did a lot and a lot of research. And the thing about hackathons is that the more you try to ideate about a particular hackathon, about a particular project, you have a lot of ideas, a lot of features. But one thing you need to know, keep it simple, right? You don't need to have all the features working. You don't need to have all the functions working. You need to keep it simple, and you don't need to complete your project when you're hacking. So for the Easy Wally, we were not able to complete, but then our basic functions were working. So simply put, you go into our app, you go into our desktop app, and then you just click to connect your number, and then a tab comes in, then you enter your number, and then you link your wallet, right? As simple as that. And then we now put in the goals that, okay, this is the future goals that we have for this particular project. So you don't need to finish your product.
All right, that's cool. So it's more like a hackathon is just like a ground for you to take an idea to like a proof of concept. It doesn't necessarily have to get it. Cool. Cool. Now let's
Exactly.
get to the business itself, right? Um, so when you go to hackathons, right, most people don't go to hackathons with like sometimes they don't even go with an idea. They just go to the hackathon and they now start looking for team members or to now ideate. And so how what specifically do you look out for to choose team members, or do you go along with people already?
All right. So most of my hackathons, I think, was having new team members, especially the ones that I won, having new team members in most of the hackathons. Some of them I had my own team members, which I already went to with previous hackathons. But the thing about hackathons is that sometimes you don't have the idea, but then you need to come together and then bring up an idea, right? So when you come for a hackathon, you might have 5 team members. Everyone has a simple idea about how this particular hackathon should be, right? Um, but then you need, when you start talking, right? So in a hackathon, we have phases, but then before then, you need to have other phases also in hackathons. And one phase I say is a talking stage. So in a hackathon, you don't need to just come up and be like, okay, this is good. We should just uh, build this up. Because That is why I always advise that even for a hackathon, the best stage is that to have a project manager or a project lead, right? It's the best because when you sit down and you build at once, you don't get the full picture. But then when you sit down to talk, you get a full picture. So when you start to have new team members or old team members talk about the hackathon or talk about the project, when you start talking about the project, you start talking about some of the defects of the project, right? You start talking about some of how the project will help solve solutions. How will users use your app? What are some of the benefits of your project? What is how some of the income that you make through your project? And when you start talking to your team members about this particular project, you get to understand that each and everyone has a different idea and you get to understand your project better. But then when you have the project just into your mind and you don't talk about the project, you might think the project is good and you get stuck. So what you're supposed to build after talking about the stage, you start having 7 hours of that time trying to now brainstorm about the project. And that happened to me in one of the hackathons where we just started building the product because we thought that the product was really good and it will really help everyone. And then we reached the middle stage and we realized that the project was just a useless project. And we had to do a 7 hours. I even have a picture of that particular time. We had to do a 7 hours brainstorming about that particular project. We had to take a board and start all over again because we felt like the project was not really good. So when you start a project, first talk about the project, right? You don't just jump on a project. So when you have new team members and new people who come together to build something, talk about the idea you have. Your idea might be good in your head, but when you talk about it, you get to understand that it's not that good, right? And keep it simple. That is another thing. Keep the idea very simple.
All right. So now you're talking about like it's not coming together. So now that you have a team, how do you facilitate brainstorming sessions where you can judge what is feasible and what is not feasible? Like you said, you did a product thinking in your head that this is really cool. Then into the hackathon, then you realize that no, this thing does not make sense. Right? And we see that in Web3, people go out there and build anything. So in your brainstorming session, what strategies do you use to know that this particular business case I'm choosing is feasible? It, this thing can work, cannot work. Just give me some of the strategies you employ.
Number one, I talk to other team members, other groups, right? So I just move around. That is what I do most of the times. And I'm like, what are you building? And the team tells us that, okay, this is what we're building. And then we also tell them our idea. And asking questions about your project is good. But the more someone asks a lot of questions, like what about the security? What about the impact? What about the economics of this particular project? And you can't answer all those questions about those about the project that you are building. It's best if you don't build that product because you don't have any idea about the product. Either you go and do a research or you leave that particular product. Because when you ask people a lot of questions about a product and the person is not able to answer a lot of give a lot of answer to that particular project or that particular product, it becomes an issue. So what I do, number one, is talk to people about the project. Number two is talking about the brainstorming. We have a board, right? Or you have a book, or you have something that you write about the project. So a project manager needs to know some things in terms of how you map it, in terms of the technologies you are going to use for that particular project. And that also depends on the bounties, right? Because you're not only building just to go and pitch, you are building for those particular bounties. So you look at the project and you look at some of the functions of the project and you look at how you can actually integrate some of the bounties that you have for those hackathons inside the project. So for instance, when you're like doing a product or a project that involves data, right? And there's a bounty for graph, you know automatically that you need to use graph. So you write all those things down that you need to use for that particular project, right? And then the other stage is where you guys come all together again and now send taxes to each other. And so you'd need a project manager, you need a front end, you need a back end. Sometimes you could just need a front end depending on the whole situation. Then you need a designer for the project. And then for me, I say that sometimes even if you have more room for team members, you would get someone who can really talk, right? Someone who is a talkative. Um, in the sense that sometimes it's not only about the product, but it's how you sell the product and how that particular person has the view of that particular product. So you have someone who can talk really, really well in your team, and then after that brainstorming, then you start building. But then when you're brainstorming, right, a lot of ideas will come when you're building in hackathons. You need to break it down. You need to really, really break it down to make it very, very, very simple. Because the more you build, the more ideas come. A lot and a lot of ideas come when you're building, and you need to find a way to make it very simple, like the function is very simple. So if you have an idea where you're supposed to link wallet addresses to crypto, right, and then you have an idea thinking about how you can create a whole wallet in that particular project you are building, it's best if you create a wallet or you create a tool that links wallet addresses to numbers. It's not advisable to join those particular two ideas that you have in that particular hackathon because you have a limited time. Maybe it could be 3 days, it could be 1 day. So you'd have a very limited time to build. So you need to make the idea very, very simple.
All right, you got that too. When you're brainstorming, make sure you take um, realistic features that are time bound, and you have to keep it simple. All right, got that. All right, too. You mentioned taking sponsors, right? Right. So the question I really want to know is, what I really want to know is that, so in a hackathon that you go that has like 10 bounties from different sponsors, how do you know that, okay, these are the bounties that you're applying? Because some people go and apply for every bounty, which in turn does not, is that because of that, they would be building so many features because they want to touch every specific sponsor that if they don't win this, they win another. What, how do you play around that? Do you also do that, or you just take the one that is, I don't know. I want to hear your views on that.
All right. So it depends, right? Some hackathons you would have a mentor, but some hackathons you didn't have a mentor to tell you that. But the main thing is that when you're building a hackathon, you found a solution or a problem that you want to solve. What are some of the things you need to build that particular project? Now, you can talk about data, you can talk about maybe having to integrate a financial system, you can talk about having to query data, or you can talk about transacting. We have a lot of things involved when you're building that particular project that you want to build. Now, when you look at the bounties, let's say we have push protocol bounty, we have graph bounty, we have chain link bounty, we have a lot of bounties. The thing is that it's easier for you to integrate, let's say, graph and chain link together into your project. But it's very difficult to integrate, let's say you want to integrate push integration, you want to integrate chain link, you want to integrate graph, your product will end up not working, or your product will end up not doing anything at the end, right? Because you can't integrate those particular three tools inside your project. And so your project becomes useless. So when you are like building and you're looking at bounties, look at the one that is very flexible. Look at the one that you can actually easily integrate into your particular app, because you don't have time to integrate everything or all the bounties in that particular project unless the bounties are open track that you can be able to select the ones that you want to select. But then when we have different bounties with different integrations, you have to select the one that is very flexible with what you want to actually build. Like graph, as I said, if you want to query data, graph is the best. And then you can integrate other ones that are similar into your particular project. So let's say you have a project that is solving off ramp and on ramp. And let's say probably you want to use, should I say, you want to use maybe base as integration, then you can use optimism. That is flexible, right? Because you want to use payment systems for optimism and base. But then having two things that don't work is worse. So best advice is that select the one that is best for that particular product and work on it. It's not advisable to take all the bounties. You might end up not winning anything. So select the one that works for yourself and then go ahead with that.
All right, cool, cool, cool. Just to follow up on the sponsors, right? You know, there are track systems in hackathons. There's open track, there's bounty. There are
Mhm.
specific tracks, maybe a topic like a theme, like NFT and stuff.
Yeah.
For new who are not really going to the hackathon, so just walk us through how the things work so that people can really familiarize themselves, like how
Okay.
tracks, so some people get confused.
All right. So now let me focus on like ways in which you win hackathons, right? Let me focus on that too. So hackathons are like training you, right? And it's various ways in which hackathons train you. Number one is more of like teamwork, how you can be able to work with people. Number two is more of like how you're attentive to details, right? So in hackathons, you need to listen to the mentors, you need to listen to the judges very carefully. There are some things that they really need in your particular hackathon. There are some bounties that people are really focused on. And so sometimes when you have opening ceremonies in hackathons, it's very necessary to listen to details. Like our current hackathon for the Eat Accra, I think the bounty, it wasn't really mentioned that the climate change would have a bounty. I don't know if it was there, but then it was not really clear. But then in the opening ceremony, they had details about having a climate solution, which people are really promoting these days. And so taking that detail is very important because you now know what to build, or you now know what to build around solving solutions. Because um like it's Safari, they were focused on education. So you should know that we're going to build something around education. So hackathons is not just about you trying to build something, but it's about listening to details. And so mentors or sometimes judges, sometimes they are the sponsors for those particular events. So you really need to listen to them when you're talking. And then you can get those information there and know what you want to build for those particular hackathons. And that is how you find a way to hack, right? Is that's how you find a way to win hackathons. So, and all I'll say is that you also need to listen to details when you're um, hacking in hackathons. Yeah.
Right. So I just want to also share an experience. So a friend of mine told me that there was this 1 month long hackathon. I think a chilling hackathon last year. He had really built a robust system. But the thing is, it's the last day that they submitted that, like, he realized that somebody had built something less of what he had built, and the person had won the bounty. He didn't understand. So he took it up with the judges, only for the judges to tell him that he should go and check the track's requirements. He went overboard what they were asking for. So I think what you're saying is really right. So, so somebody did less work than him won the bounty because he didn't pay attention to details. I meant to build to impress, whilst he didn't focus on the hackathon guidelines. So I think what you said is really good.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I also had experienced one hackathon where I think it was 2 months, but then we were building, adding a lot of features, and I feel like the simple features we were supposed to add, we didn't add them, and so sadly, we didn't win anything for the hackathon, right? But then we learned a lot from that particular hackathon. So you could use a 2 months time to actually build something, but if the simple features, the simple things, or the simple requirements that the judges ask of you to build and you don't build it, it becomes a cost 90 job, right? So it's best if you really listen, if you build simple things instead of robust things in hackathons. And one thing is hackathons, you're not supposed to complete them. As I said, it's something that you use to learn. It's a learning period for you. It's an experience period for you. So I know that some people are like, really experienced in hackathons here right now. And anytime that you build or you're in hackathons, you learn new things, right? You don't, and I would say that is why it's very, very good to participate in hackathons. Because for me, anytime I participate in hackathons, like I learn new things. It got to a time I remember we were participating in one hackathon and we were it was a whole night and we had to go back because our smart contracts were not working. So we had to delete all the code in terms of the smart contract and rewrite everything, which kept us waiting. But the truth was that at the starting we didn't really draw our map in terms of our hackathon and what we actually wanted to build. And so when we placed in the smart contracts for that particular hackathon, we made a mistake, right? So we had to delete the code and redo everything. So my best advice is that when you're hacking, it's not just about the money, but it's about the experience. So anytime you hack, you learn new things. Yeah.
All right, spot on. All right, so still coming back to feasibility, man. How do you? I just still coming to the feasibility of what you're building. Like it's all about requirements and feasibility, right? So how do you evaluate what is the best technical design, business case, and maybe the product specifications for your product? Now let's get to the details of actually the building process of building a product.
All right.
So
All right.
product,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this also comes in listening to the judges and mentors. So I remember one particular hackathon, we had a session and a mentor was saying that this particular hackathon, we have a lot of issues where people build apps where the interface is still a Web3 interface. Why not we make the interface a Web2 interface? Then we have the backend in a blockchain. And when he started talking about that, we realized that that was what his emphasis was on. And so when we were building, we needed to put our emphasis on that. And so we built the app having that was now I think it's called account abstraction, where you build the app where the front end has a login, but the back end is blockchain. Because these days we are trying to onboard users, but then most of them are Web2, right? And that is what he was saying. I think that was Chainlink, that was long ago. And when you're onboarding users, especially Web2 users, they don't know what is Connect Wallet. They don't know what is having to connect a wallet to MetaMask or to other wallets or Trust Wallet, right? All they want to know is log in your email and then find a way to figure around that particular app. So when we listen to that detail, we realize that when we are building our tech stack and everything that we are doing, we need to use some particular tech um, requirements. So our front end, we did do a lot of Web2 using Web2 web programming language, but our back end was Solidity. But then when you check our interface, you realize that we didn't have anything to show that it was a Web3 app. But then when you are able to log in to see everything about our interface, you realize that it's a Web3 app, but then a Web2 app at once. We had another experience where we were building an app, but then it talked about AI integration app, and that is where the the talks were going, right? So the mentors and the judges were always talking about how you can actually integrate AI into these particular apps. So AI and blockchain, how can they relate? And so we started searching of how we can actually integrate AI and blockchain. So at that particular time, we used OpenAI, and then we used the normal tech stuff that we were using. I think that was JavaScript, React.js, and then we used Solidity, right? But then another hackathon we had was that was Turn Gene AI. That was one of my best project that I love so much. That was a Telegram mini app, right? That takes all the data from a particular blockchain, which was the Ton, right? And I think we also got something out of that. So it depends on what they require you to do, right? You don't need to build because you need to build. So for that particular Telegram mini app, and it was also a new thing, right? In Web3, everything is new. We building that particular mini app, we didn't have a lot of experience in that we had to do a lot of research in terms of what people have built. During that time, it was this particular airdrop time. Was it that pizza? I think it was dog in those airdrops time. These mini apps, right? So this particular mini app had some particular features which you could look at. And one thing about Web3 is it's open. Most of the projects that are built in hackathons are open source codes, right? So you can actually look at the code and then see how you can build a similar app. So you can look at projects that are already built in hackathons. Like you can check out websites like DuraHacks, Chainlink, um, Taika platform, and they already have projects that are being built and they are open source projects, right? So you can look at those codes and then you can even copy some. Look, push protocol, right? Which is it push protocol or Uniswap? Was a copied code, right? Uniswap and then one particular app again, they are copied code, right? And that's one fun thing about Web3. Just find a solution and copy that code, and not everything though, but like copy that particular code, and then you can fix it into your project and see how it works, right? So it's not a sin, but most project builds these days are open source. So it makes it very, very easier for you to build applications.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So I was even coming to that question where it was like, should you go like, should I build something from scratch, or should I just build on top of an existing solution? And Web3 is such a place where everything is open source, right? Look at Uniswap and PancakeSwap. Yeah, basically PancakeSwap is a fork of Uniswap, and SushiSwap is a fork of PancakeSwap. And it goes on and on and on. So there's a question I wanted to ask. I think you have touched on it, but if you want to expand a little, when you choose a hackathon idea and you don't really know how to build it, should you like when you go into a hackathon, should you build from scratch, or you should build on top of something? Or yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it depends, right? The thing is that already programmers know initially things are still new, right? So even when you find yourself in terms of some problems, it's difficult for you to find solutions for that. For an example, the first product that we were building, which was Easy Wally, we had a tough situation. Our app wasn't working, right? And I think the issue that we had was that um, we didn't change the network. That was the issue. But then when we searched Google, we searched AI, we didn't find solution for that, right? So sometimes at that moment you need to find your own solution. But then talking about building, it also depends again. Some particular apps are still new, so you need to build from the scratch, right? But then some particular apps are also similar, like the way we were talking about Sushi Swap and Uniswap, right? And you can just copy those particular codes and paste. You don't need to suffer. That's one thing about Solidity, right? So when you're building, sometimes it's not compulsory to build everything from the scratch, right? You can look at other open source projects, right? And then just copy some code and add it. You don't need to suffer to build from the scratch because hackathons are always limited, right? You have a limited time. And so, like in 3 days, you don't need to uh, build everything from scratch because you're uh, having to do a lot of other things. You need to make other features work, right? So you don't need to build from the scratch. But when you're building some projects, you actually need to build from the scratch, or else you would end up having a lot of bugs and errors.
Exactly. So you should not try to reinvent the wheel all the time. Like you should like take advantage of what is already existing, and what you only set you apart is what you add on top of it. Don't like try to reinvent the whole wheel like in 3 days in a 3-day hackathon. It will really help you. All right. So I just lastly on the building process, right? How do you I don't know if you work as a product manager or a developer, but how do you prioritize like this is the feature we'll do first? How do you plan your project basically? And like which tools do you use to like plan your project? Do you document how every parts, every stage you're going to like build this part, do this, do this. How do you like? How's the building process for you like?
So for me, I always advise that, and I think Wesley also talked about that before. Wesley is an open source contributor, right? He said something right about projects, which now people are taking it very, very, very compulsory, is the documentation side, as both the technical documentation and maybe the white paper, right? Because sometimes when you document whatever you're doing, maybe even the hardships that you have in particular project, it's more of like solidifies your projects, right? And so when for me, sometimes I work as the project manager and also more of like the designer. But then aside that, like the turn gene AI that we were building, I had to become a compulsory developer because we were having a short time to complete that particular project, right? So when we are planning the project, sometimes we write it down, as I said. And some of the tools that we usually use is sometimes we put GitHub, and sometimes some of the tools we use is Notion page. So sometimes when you start the whole project, you don't start coding at once, right? You start ideating some of the things you want to build in terms of the product, even for the technical side. And so you write it down, and sometimes we use Notion to do all that because Notion is very flexible. And so we write everything down that we need to do in terms of the project. But at times, when you start a project, you don't get all the idea about the project. When you start building, you get to understand the project more, right? So when we start, we put down the important stuff that we need to put down in terms of that particular project that we want to build. And so let's say for that particular therapeutic project that we're building, we had to put all the information that we needed down, especially the technical side and the non-technical side. And also, we made sure that when we were doing the technical documentation, we even have diagrams for those particular technical documentations that we had, so that anyone who is non-technical person would actually understand our documentation. And so that also gives you a lot of marks. You really need to let people understand the particular project that you are building. And when it becomes more difficult for people to understand or more questions are asked about your particular project, as a problem, right? The more questions about your project, sometimes it's quite bad because it's like you don't have all the details down. And so when you're planning, you plan that particular project, like, and also it depends on what you want to build, right? If it's a financial system that you want to build, if it's a tool that you want to build, you should know and you should write it down, right? So the first stage about building a project is writing everything down, trying to document everything that you want to build down. And when you're coding, as time progresses, you get to understand that you need to add more details about your project or more documentation about your project. But then again, you need to make your project very simple. I'm always trying to emphasize on that because sometimes when you're building a project, it becomes more complex. It becomes bigger, and you need to try to make those complexities into something simple for you to build, or else you will not be able to build that particular project that you want to build. I hope I answered your question, Likem.
Right. I really like the way you put in documentation, because really when sometimes when you go for some hackathons, especially the remote ones, you will not be in there in person to be able to pitch, like sell your idea directly to the person. So your documentation will speak a lot, especially the part where you add the challenges you face. I think some hackathons require that you add the challenges that you face because they believe that it's not just about the price, it's about the experience, the learning curve. And these are some of the ways maybe the sponsors, the protocols themselves get to learn more about the product and see the pain points for developers and improve on it. So I really like how you touched on documentation. All right, so now you're done building the project, right? How do you pitch the project to the judges? In the case where the hackathon is maybe in person or either even online, how do you sell? Because how you sell the project can make it a project that you win or you lose. And Web3 is more technical. So how do you pitch the product in a way that you're able to bring all the technical jargons and make a 5 year old understand and know that this product is really important to exist? How do you pitch your product?
Number one, I think is the problem. Why were you building that particular project? So, and how are you solving that particular problem that you found, right? Number two is numbers, right? I got to understand that numbers are more important than even trying to explain all about the project. Give numbers, right? Talk about some of the problems you have. If it's, let's say, you're building a land, you're trying to solve a land problem, right? You can put up a numbers that 20% of lands are being sold, or 20% of lands are being sold to fraudsters because of this particular thing, right? And when you touch on numbers, you get to understand that it's more understandable to the judges about what you're trying to talk about in terms of your project or your product. So focus on numbers. The other thing is be passionate about your project. When you're talking about your project and you're not too sure about your project, or you're not too sure about what you're building, it becomes a problem, right? And you'll be like, it's questionable. And that is when people ask you more questions about the project, because you yourself, you're not too sure about your project. You're not passionate about your project. And so when you're pitching your project, it shows that you're not really passionate about what you're building. Because when you build a project, people need to have that vibe from you, right? The other thing is that have future plans for your project. When you're building a product, sometimes judges have been talking to a lot of mentors and judges before the particular hackathon happens, right? Sometimes they're actually looking for interns, right? They're actually looking for people to employ. Sometimes they're actually looking for ideas. They're actually looking for solutions. They are looking for startups, right? And so all this adding up, you need to find a way to have a goal for your particular project. And so your project shouldn't end in the hackathon. It should have a goal. So if you're not able to finish all the functionalities of your particular project, what's the way forward? In your documentation, you write your future plan. And so when you stated that, you can also add a diagram to your future plan, right? And it makes your project more tangible, right? So when you're having all these details there, it makes your project more solid. The other thing about pitching is that make sure that you have a revenue for your project, unless probably it's a public good or something else. But then anytime I pitch people my idea or I pitch people my project, they ask about how do you get revenue from this particular project, right? Unless your project is not a revenue model project, it's just a public goods. It also depends on the target audience that you're pitching your particular project to, because some bounties want revenue, they don't want public good projects. Some projects want public good project, they don't want revenue projects. So you need to know what you're addressing and you need to know who you're pitching to, and then you take it up from there.
Right on, very spot on. I love that. All right, so one thing we really believe at Hacker Boost is that we don't believe in build and dump. Hence, even this boot camp, right? We want to train developers that can build sustainable, profitable, and scalable projects. But one thing we really realize with hackathons is that hackathons, even though they are a learning curve for people, we see really innovative ideas that don't go past the hackathon day. So after the hackathon day, there's not really any channel where developers will continue the project. And sometimes it's because the project itself is not really feasible in the real world. Maybe in the scope of the hackathon bounties and stuff, it is feasible, but in the real world, it's not feasible. So, how do you build a project that you can ship beyond the hackathon? Right? You yourself, you said some protocols are looking for sponsors and stuff like that. Sorry, are looking for startups and stuff like that. So, how do you build the momentum for a project to become a product after the hackathon? A sustainable project after that.
All right. So um number one is the team, right? So some when it also depends, right? So sometimes when people have hackathons and it's like you form new team members, some team members are actually focused on the bounty. They are not focused on extending that particular project. So you need to sync with your team. So when you're building, that's why I'm like, the talking stage is very, very important in building a project. When you're talking, you get to understand your team members even more, and you get to understand their point of view on what you actually want to do about this particular project. And so, number one is the team, right? And so sometimes it's not really that the project is not feasible to the world, but it could be very, very feasible. But then the team is not thinking about building this product to the next stage. I remember I went to one hackathon, and our front end developer was like, he's building this particular project for the money, right? And we thought that after that particular project, we could try to sync with him. But then we got to know that he was really in for the money, and he wasn't in for building or extending the project. That's number one. Number two is that projects are like feasible, but then they always focus on funding, right? And sometimes when you are building with other people, they might have jobs, they might be students, they might be other people, and they don't have the funds, the extra funds, let me say, to um, continue that particular project. So what I would advise you when you want to continue a particular project is that when you're building for a hackathon, right? After you build for that particular hackathon, have future whole goals for each team member, right? So it's like, okay, what's next after this particular hackathon? Are we going to have a treasury for this particular hackathon? And then we put it somewhere, and then we start incentivizing this particular hackathon. The other thing is that I always have, let's say, a stage for every hackathon or every particular project. So sometimes the reason why some projects don't continue is because of the time frame, right? When you build and then you win a hackathon, after that particular hackathon, your momentum is very up. So you want to continue that particular project. But then after 3 months, or after even 2 months, or after even 1 month, after building that particular project and you're not getting any revenue, right? It becomes one thing because you're not getting the the money that you're looking for, because probably you might be looking for other grants, you might be looking after other revenues, and it also relies on the team, right? So you find yourself wanting in trying to see if you can get grants, and if you don't get grants, you stop the project, right? Because I had this experience with myself in some of my team members that I've been building for some time. Sometimes it could be that the 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 project manager or the person directing the project is not really passionate about the project, or it's not really having a communication sync with all the team members. And that is also a very big issue, because when people are building projects, you need to have a sync with every particular person building on that particular project. When the sync is not there, you cannot build that particular project. And so that is also another problem that people face when they are building projects. The other thing is that after the hackathon, people are focused about the money, right? I would say that sometimes the money is very good. That is why sometimes when you are building a project, you need to find a way that you can actually get a revenue from that particular project. And so when you study the recent hackathons coming in and the recent projects that are working, right? They already have revenue models, right? So I remember even for this base hackathon, there's a particular app that is on the base that they're already getting revenue. I think it's still an off ramp, on ramp project, and already is being used to do a lot of things, right? And so you can think about getting your own revenue from these hackathons. So after you get these bounties, or you don't even get bounties, you can create an app that will generate revenue from yourself, right? And this will be able to sustain your team members, because you need to understand the whole situation. Probably as a project manager, the person you are working with might be working somewhere else and getting money. Why would he try to dedicate his time on this particular project? The other thing is that the project manager might really state the plans for the project. What are we going to do, right? So for our recent project that we were trying to work on, we've already demarcated the time frames or the milestones for our project. And so after this particular milestone for our project, we now try to emphasize on some of the things that we need to get for this particular project. And so when the person that is in charge of that particular project doesn't really give the milestones for this particular project that you are working on, it becomes one thing, right? The other thing is probably the aim of the hackathon. So sometimes it's not really the fault of the people hacking. I might say it might be probably the organizers' um, point of view, because some hackathons, as I said, they are looking for solutions. So when they get those solutions, they really don't care about those building, right? And so when you get to understand what they really want, you get to understand that some of the project that you're actually working on is just for building for those hackathons. Because I got to um, talk with one of the mentors or one of the judges for one hackathon, and they were just looking for a solution for their particular app that they were building. And so that particular hackathon was not for projects to scale up, but then for them to just find solutions for themselves, right? So some hackathons are not meant to increase your worth of your products that you're building, but then it's just for giving you bounties, and then they taking the solution that you have and they building on it, right? So it depends on all these statistics before you can build on these hackathons. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think with the question of sustainability, it can be looked at from a lot of angles, even outside the hackathon level, right? But then because of time, that could be a whole topic, like building sustainable Web3 projects beyond hackathon. That could be a whole 1 hour talk that we can have. But because of time, we just limit it. So I want to ask the last question. Then we open the floor for Q&A. People can ask that question. So it's just a normal question. How do you manage burnout? Because especially like 3D hackathons, like it's very intensive. I remember I had that hackathon, and after the hackathon, I really could not sleep because my chest was paining me. I've not slept. So how do you just manage burnout and stuff like that? Yeah, that's the last question. Then we open the floor for Q&A.
My advice is that don't kill yourself for hackathons. Even sometimes it could get to a time that even when you're like hacking for 2 hours, that solution alone could win you like three bounties, right? So my advice for you is that don't kill yourself for hackathons. There's a better life after hackathons, right? So talking about stress, right? It depends, right? It depends. So for me, when we are really stressed out, for me, I go out and walk and have a walk. Just not think about the hackathon. Just walk around and have a nice, like, think about something nice. If it's your, so sometimes you could actually have blackouts when you're hacking, because it's like you're hacking, and the problem is not you're not solving the problem, and it's like you're not going anywhere, right? So you need to refreshing your mind. So if you need 1 hour of sleep, take that 1 hour of sleep. If you need to eat something, right? Don't kill yourself. When you're able to refresh your mind, or you're able to move your mind off that hackathon for that particular 1 hour or that particular 30 minutes, you realize that you're able to achieve more. So when you're really stressed out, find yourself doing something else from the hackathon, or try going to talk with other people, try having conversations with other people, because hackathons, I told you, it's not only about hacking, right? You need to network. So even maybe working with someone in your team might be well, but then having interactions with other team members, you realize that you might even work with other team members in your next hackathon. So you need to network, you need to talk to other people, you need to have interactions with them. And so all these are included in these hackathons. So when you're hacking for a hackathon, you don't need to focus on only your project. You become very stressed out, right? So find something doing else when you're very stressed, right? And don't kill yourself for hackathons. That's what I would advise you. But then try your best, do your ultimate best to finish the product, right? But don't try to finish the product, but do your ultimate best to finish the product, right? So that is what I have about being able to manage your stress in terms of hackathons.
Yeah, all right. We will leave the floor to questions, but What do you mean by try your best to finish the product, but don't finish the product?
Yeah,
Me,
because if you think of not finishing the product, you actually not finish the product, right? That is hackathon. And if you have the mindset of finishing the product and you reach a stage where you're not able to actually even finish the product, it's actually good. So it's about the mindset too in terms of hackathons. It's about the mindset. Yeah.
all right. So I think Joe Bill has a question. You can unmute yourself and ask.
All right, guys. Good evening, GM everyone. Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation so far. Thank you, the organizers, for making this. Thank you, Pablo, for also sharing your thoughts and your experiences. So my question is more about looking at the formats of some of these hackathons, right? For most of the hackathons that I've been to or that we usually know of, it's a 1 day or 2 day or 3 day hackathon. After that, they give prizes. Then there's not that follow up culture where they follow up on the projects that have been built, or whether they are continuing in. Hey, my English is not coming. Continuing, continue, Charlie. Whether they continue the program or the projects that they built, right? Or they are pivoting or something. I know of one. I think recently the Lisk, I think it was a hackathon that eventually moved into like an incubation program. What would you say about that? Should organizers of these hackathons be looking at having some, at least, even if it's not going to be an incubation program attached to the hackathon, maybe marketing or business development, you know, yeah, like a session on that, or a couple of experts there to help some of these young developers also crafts, because that is a whole issue on its own. Some of them are really good at the technical stuff, but how to build products that someone would actually take money from their pockets and pay. Okay, pockets, we are crypto people, so take money from their crypto wallets and pay is a headache on its own, right? So yeah, should we be looking at the format of these hackathons? That's the question. What's your opinion on that?
So talking about hackathons, right? I wanted to talk about that, but I didn't want to put more strain on that, right? So the issue is that, let's say, okay, let me talk on the organizer's point of view, right? So I think that when we hack, right, the organizer should have something like a mentorship program for the hackers, right? That is my suggestion. That is my view. Because, for instance, let's say the Leaks hackathon or the Ithakra hackathon that we had, right? When we finish the hackathon, because you can't learn everything about a hackathon in just 3 days or 2 days. That is why I'm like, hackathons are like more of like experiences for us. And so you can't learn how to mentor yourself during a hackathon, or you can't learn how to mentor yourself for projects, right? And so I think after this particular hackathons that we have mentorship programs on how to elevate your project. Because we might have the idea on how to elevate our project, but then it's not everyone. Because when we went for even the current Ithakra, we had a lot of students that were new to even Web2, right? We had a lot of students that didn't even know anything about Web3. They didn't know anything about scalability. They didn't know anything about elevating your particular product. It's only about um, winning the bounty, networking with people, having a lot of bounties, or having a lot of money, or trying to do other things, right? So these things are not taught. So my suggestion is that after the hackathons, we could have something like mentorship programs or grant support programs for this particular project. But then, as you said, it depends on the organizers too, right? We can't really do anything about the organizers in terms of building products in hackathons, but then we can give these suggestions to them on how to go about the next hackathons that they have, like leagues, And talking about leaks, what they are doing currently, and it's a very good thing, right? Now they have a mentorship program, and so people are not left out in terms of the hackathon. They know that they are part of an ecosystem that supports them in terms of building in hackathon or building projects, right? And that is the good thing about mentorship, about supporting this particular project that's like scalable. Yeah.
All right. So I think one thing I also wanted to add was that for hackathon, we actually offer post hackathon support. So we'll be having a hackathon just after the bootcamp, but we'll also offer post hackathon support because one thing we realize is that people have ideas, but they don't have direction, right? They don't have a direction on what they want to build, or they don't have mentorship on how to go about it, or how to get access to funding. So on Hackathons, we actually do offer post after hack post. Yeah. So I think Bright, I'm not. I sorry, let me just say Bright. I don't know how to mention your surname. I don't want to. Say good evening. I actually participated in a hackathon already on Dora Hack, but I don't know how to follow up. Is there any way we can follow up with hackathons? Probably do you want to touch on that?
Yes, so Dora hacks sometimes when you're like hacking, right? There's a place where you can do follow up, like get their newsletters, and they could send you an email, right? I can't check that now on the laptop, but they have a feature there where they ask you that could they give you updates on the hackathons and could they be sending you emails, right? Sometimes if you don't win on Dora hacks, they don't send you anything until you win, right? But sometimes they do give you updates. So you need to manually let them like send you updates on Dora hacks.
All right, cool. The floor is still open. We have some few minutes to end this session. In the meantime, the floor is still open for questions. Don't so I just raise your hands up. We just open the mic for you, give you the mic to ask your question. Any question is not dumb. It can be complex, can be simple. Pablo is here to answer.
Okay, guys. So as we wait for you guys to ask your questions, I want us to give thumbs up for Pablo, that's Akapko, and then Likem for this session. This is really, really awesome. We learned a lot, and I think we should applaud them for this. Also, some of you asked a question that will this session be recorded? Yes, we are recording the session, and it will be made available tomorrow. It takes like 3 hours for the session to be available from YouTube, from Google rather. So when we have it ready, we upload it on YouTube and share with you. But let this not skip me. Our upcoming hackathon is currently in the works, and you guys should get ready to push beyond boundaries. In fact, we are going to put a lot into the planning for you to, you know, I think next week we will be announcing it with all the juicy, the details and yeah. So stay tuned for what will be coming. And if you are currently participating in the Hackables Web3 Dev Bootcamp, you are automatically qualified, except that you don't get to conclusion. But if you're able to get to the final stage of the bootcamp, we are only left with, I think, 3 weeks to conclude the ongoing boot camp. So if you are currently participating, automatically you are qualified when the hackathon is ready. But it doesn't mean we will not get other people to join. We are going to have a criteria that will qualify other people to join the hackathon. And we've learned a lot from this session today, which we are going to incorporate in our planning for the upcoming hackathon. Like Ernest said, you don't have to complete your project during a hackathon, but make sure that all the necessary functionalities. Another thing I got from his presentation was that don't go into a hackathon with a mindset of just the money, but rather think of what you are going to build. Have passion for, your project. And as we always say in Hacker Boost, if you are building with passion for your project, the money will automatically come. The problem we have here is that people focus more on the outcome than the input. And if your focus is more on the outcome, you you deny investing more in the input, which will generate the outcome. All right. So this session is very great, and we've learned a lot from Ernest Akapko. Please, guys, if you have any question, you can ask. I think we're supposed to close at 8, but it is already 8:11 now. If you don't have more questions, I think Liam can close the session for today, and then we'll hope to see you guys next time.
Thank you very much, Sahavia. Thank you so much. All right, so I'll just give it 1 minute. If anyone asks a question, then we close the session. I want to say that no question is dumb. If it's simple, if it's complex, just ask it. But in 1 minute time, if you want to, then we'll call it a night.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Victor.
hello.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, Manu, go ahead.
I don't know. I actually have a question, but my background is like very noisy. I don't know, and there's no way I can be able to like get out of this place right now.
No, we can hear you, continue.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can, please continue, we can hear you. Or you can type it. You just type it fast. And,
All right, Ima, we can hear you. Can you speak up?
Okay. So this is my question to Ernest. Yes, Ernest. I know that. Please, I would love to type, or maybe for the sake of the background, I may have to like type.
oh, you got it. Just
Hello. Is that okay?
go ahead. Uh, so I think you're muted. Alright, I believe you're typing. Alright. In the
Yeah.
meantime,
Hello. Yes.
yeah,
So
go ahead.
this is with regards to team dynamics. In Ernest's presentation, he had mentioned many times he had worked teams he has already formed before the hackathon, and then one he had formed on ground for the hackathon. I will, it's kind of like working in a team. There are a lot of people with unique ideas on how we should go about the project and all that. That may be like team dynamics. I don't know how. What were the challenges he had faced formulating or working in a team, and then how has he been able to overcome them? Yes, I think shortly, I would love to know.
All right. So a quick one was that. So I had an engagement with one team, right? And the thing was, they all had different ideas, and they all felt like the ideas were very great, right? And so what we did was that we decided to ask questions about our idea. So when I brought up my idea, they asked a lot of questions. How would my idea help? What's the security about my idea? And if I'm able to answer all the questions, I'm good to go. Then we talk. We do the same for the whole team members, right? Because everyone had a unique idea that he wanted to build. And so that was one of the challenges I had. But the thing also was about asking questions about our project. How is the project going to help? What's the project trying to solve? What is the solution for the project? What are we trying to build? And we also looked at the bounties, if the bounties were trying, or what the mentors or the judges said, whether our project aligns with what they wanted, right? And with all those informations, we're able to sync and build something.
No, no, no. I hope that answers you. All right, cool. Um, does any other person have a question? Go in, go in. If you have a question, just raise your hands. All right, Emmanuel, go. Yeah, unmute yourself. Yeah, continue, Emmanuel. I think you
Yeah,
have.
yeah. Hello, hello.
Yeah,
You can hear me,
yeah,
right?
hi. I can hear you. Please continue.
Yes. So, Ernest, thanks for that answer. I love that answer. And I would love to know. So, basically, winning a hackathon, you've won many hackathons, created innovative solutions, and then I would love to know what are the just mention for me three three solid things to have up your sleeve if you want to win hackathons or projects you may want to scale later. Did you get that?
Yeah. So number one, right? Try to make your product as simple as possible, right? Solve a simple solution, not a complex solution, right? Number two, try to talk about your project. Ask a lot of questions about your project. The more you can answer yourself about your project, the lesser the value of the project. Number two, is your product actually scalable, right? That's number three. Is your product actually scalable? Would people love to use your product? Some products could be really, really good, but then when you send it to the market, you realize that that product is not really a good product for the market. So is your product scalable? So if you're able to determine these three things, I think you're good to go, because all these three things solve the solution about being passionate about your product, being like energized about your product and everything. It all aligns with these three things. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I believe we have exceeded the time limit. I would love to end on this note. Over to you, Xavier.
All right. So have a good night, everyone, and um, stay tuned for the video. It will be ready by tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining the session.
Yeah. Thank you too. Nice meeting you.
Uh,